All right, y'all, let's talk about presentation aids or visual aids. Okay, I'm gonna leave this here so that you can see the notes as you're taking notes. That way you can see the slide and kind of the notes that I'm going off of, and that might help you. All right, so let's start with the basics. Hopefully that's big enough for you to see. The visual part is necessary, but so is the aid part. I love that quote because it is very true. A visual aid is not for you. It is for the audience, okay? Yes, you can use your visual aid. I'm not saying like you can't look at it, but the visual aid is for the audience. Always remember that. We will do and use them more than we may think. So just kind of a rule of thumb, I'll say this probably almost every other chapter. We're talking about visual aids in general. Yes, you will use a visual aid for your demonstration speech, but we're also just talking about, visual aids just in public speaking in that realm in general. So benefits of visual aids, we'll go through this kind of quick. They clarify information. They gain and sustain audience attention, which you know, right? It's nice to have something to look at besides the speaker. It increases credibility of the speaker. So it can be impressive if the speaker has an example of something, if they have, a copy of something or a visual, just a visual representation that can increase credibility. It improves your delivery. That one's kind of self-explanatory, and they're memorable. So let's talk about types of visual aids. I know the chapter is called presentation aids. I'm just kind of in the habit of calling them visual aids. They're synonymous, they're the same thing. So just so you know, I'm just gonna call them visual aids. So objects. So a good thing about objects is it allows for a better understanding. So for example, a musical instrument when there is no better substitute. So if you're talking about how to play the piano, you can say like, all right, the key 15th to the left or something, like, oh my gosh, that would be so confusing. But if you have a picture or, if you're able to bring it, or not a picture, I'm sorry, an object, that was a dumb example to bring a piano. Okay, let's say a trumpet. If you can bring the trumpet with you, that can be really helpful for, hand placement and stuff like that. A con about objects are some are too big to bring. For example, the dumb example I just gave you, a piano. You can't just like lug a piano around. Or they're inappropriate to bring. So, whether they're dangerous, offensive, etc. And living objects can be hard to control. So I had a student one semester and it went great, but I warned her about this. I had a student who had a lot of younger siblings, and for her demonstration speech, she did how to feed a baby. And that was actually really, really, her younger sibling came with her to class and she fed the sibling in front of us. And it went great, but as you know, living objects are hard to control. You can bring, you can't for this presentation, but you can have a dog that does the same trick over and over. But sure enough, the one time you want them to do it in front of an audience, they're going to be silly. They're going to run around and want to do other stuff. Okay, so that's just something to be mindful of. Models allow for better understanding so they can see something in action. So I always think about when I was little and you go to the dentist and they have those big fake teeth and that huge toothbrush. And they show you how to brush your teeth and you do this, right? So that can be really helpful. Or like it says below in the notes, a CPR demonstration. I wish I had time to put the the scene from The Office when they're doing the CPR. Anyway, all right, if you haven't seen it, don't worry about it. If you know, you know. All right, graphs. So graphs, let's move down here. Graphs are visually represent statistics. So you want to keep them simple. You don't want too much information because that can be, even if people have time to read through it, that can be kind of monotonous or confusing and overwhelming. Maps, so let's say you're showing where something happened. Beware of drawing your own map. They're usually not to scale. And be sure that they're clear and obviously accurately marked and labeled if you have a label. Tables are orderly depictions of statistic, words, or symbols. Kind of the same thing with graphs, to be honest. It can become too cluttered with information, so just be mindful of that, of not, just doing too much with one table. Pictures or photographs. They can make a point, clarify information, or draw attention, but can be bad if the audience can't see them. So if you can, it's always good to like blow them up, I know that sometimes the quality of the picture that can be impacted if you do blow it up. But again, I also know that it can be really interesting to see a picture. I'm not saying don't do pictures, because that can be kind of like a one of a kind thing. If you have a picture of something and it's different than just Googling a stock photo, right? Or if it's like you with something, okay? But just be mindful. Drawings. So drawings can be really good. Just be sure the drawing is done effectively and not sloppy, confusing, or inaccurate. So if you're like, well, I've always thought I like to draw, and you're not that good, that's not a good idea to use it as a visual aid. Use it for a hobby. Don't use it to present something or to exemplify something. You do not want me to draw, like I don't even draw stick figures well, okay? So be mindful of the talent that you or the speaker might have if using a drawing. Audio, visual, and multimedia. It can motivate attention and help to move among and clarify points. Okay, so here's the thing, y'all. I don't know if I've told you. I mean, I think I've told you I'm from Texas. And I know that the stereotype still rings true. I realized that when I moved here, of people thinking people from Texas are hillbillies and we all, ride our tractors to school or our horses. Yes, there are towns like that in Texas. I'm from Dallas, which is like a huge city. I know you've heard of it. Dallas is super, super city. So I'm not a country girl. So I had a student do a presentation over how to, oh my gosh, I can't even think of the name, how to like herd sheep, or not herd sheep. It was like how to basically like get the shave sheep. I can't think of it. I know I'm making a fool out of myself even now. I'm not joking. I can't think of what it's called. And I'm not going to take the time to look it up for your sake. So you don't have to wait for me to look it up. So, how to shear sheep. How to shear sheep. So, that was, I had never heard of that. I'm going to be honest. Don't judge me. I know I remember some of you used to do 4A, 4H. Okay, anyway, I'm just embarrassing myself at this point. So I had never heard of that. So I told him, not just for my sake, but if people haven't heard of it, it could be cool once you go through all the steps to show a video of the final thing. And that really helped the audience, and even me as the teacher, that really helped us understand, like, okay, here it is all put together. Okay, so those are types of visual aids. Now let's talk about selecting the correct medium for visual aids. So as you see in the notes, there are pros and cons for each of them that we're going to talk about. Okay, so if you need to pause this slide so you can get them down, that might be a good idea. It's up to you. I'm going to be honest, I can't remember if there's a question on your midterm about this, but whatever. Take good notes just for the ethics of taking good notes. So selecting the correct medium for visual aids, a chalkboard or whiteboard. So, and sometimes you don't have control over these, just so you know, as you probably can imagine. Chalkboard Pro is they're good to use when the time and situation does not allow for improved technology. It's good for the flow of ideas. So if you're brainstorming, it can be that might be the best visual aid, as old school as it might seem, of a chalkboard or a whiteboard when there's so much other stuff. And yes, I know that there's, like iPads or whatever where you can write with like a pen or whatever on there, but still, I mean that, it can be really good when you're brainstorming and you need to see the flow. It also allows for interaction with your audience, so it can be a live, kind of with that brainstorming of them saying like, okay, it's this. Then you're like, yeah, and then you write it down. And it can also allow for you to see that flow of ideas and to see the, what's already been said. Be sure, again, we're still on the pros, be sure that you print words big enough so the audience can see, okay? Cons or disadvantages of a chalkboard or whiteboard. As it says, the quality of the table, drawing, etc. can be bad and cause it to be more of a distraction. Taking the time to write on them wastes time and causes the audience to wait. That's a big reason why I know a lot of instructors are different. That's a big reason why I don't write on the board as we take notes. I know we're not doing in-person classes this semester, but because it just takes time. And then, your handwriting can be bad, like mine is kind of bad. So just something to be mindful of. Poster board. Again, I know that's kind of old school. You might think of like elementary and middle school projects, but there's still good use for them. So a poster board, easy access to poster boards. I know that's kind of a silly thing, but they're relatively cheap. So that it is easy access. You can even go to Dollar Tree and get a poster for $1. Letters and numbers need to be big enough to see, and you want to keep the poster board clean and simple so it is not distracting. Cons is if there's no easel or stand available, it can distract listeners while the speaker is messing with the board, trying to use it to interact with the audience, trying to hold it up if it's one of the flimsier poster boards. So that can be something that factors in. Also, I would add that a pro for poster board, and it's any of these that don't involve technology, is there's no technology. So you don't have to worry about technology failing. You have the poster board. A con of the poster board I would add is if, you just have the one poster board. Sorry if y'all can hear my baby crying. You only have the one poster board. So let's say, I know this is like a, not freak accident, but I know but things happen. Might be a dumb example, but if it's raining and you don't have an umbrella and your poster board gets messed up, or you spill coffee, you stop at Starbucks or Dunkin' or wherever you prefer coffee, and it spills on your poster board, and then now it's ruined, and then now it's hard to have a backup plan. Handouts. So good thing about handouts is listeners can keep it after the presentation is over, so they can refer to the information. Because as you know, listening to a lot of information, it can get really dense and really, I don't want to say confusing, but just pretty dense. And if you need to refer to that information later, that way they have it to use after the presentation. It also allows for a larger amount of information to be seen. So if you are using a lot of tables because you don't want just one big table to show something going on, then you can have like, okay, on page 3, blah, blah, blah. Okay, now let's refer to this table. A con of handouts is passing them out in the middle of speech breaks the flow and wastes time. If speakers are looking at the handout, they're not listening to your speech. What do we do anytime we get a handout or a packet? We look forward to see what we're going to be talking about, what's in the handout. Don't use a handout if the crowd is large and your speech is short. Video excerpts or clips. So the pro is it grabs attention. As I said, for the types, it can be a really good way to bring together steps for us to see, what steps look like in action, whether it's like a dance move or something like that. The con is your speech can seem dull compared to a Hollywood movie. I know that's kind of silly, but the book that I got this information from mentioned that a video doesn't equal the speech. So a lot of times not a lot of times, I shouldn't say that, but I've had students in the past ask like, okay, well, can I just like play the video of me doing it? And I'm like, no, that's not public speaking. So you can have a video in your speech for the demonstration speech for this class, but it needs to be like no longer than like 30 seconds to 45 seconds, okay? Excuse me, I'm sorry. PowerPoint, Prezi, etc. The pro is you can make it work by not making slides so complicated. I don't want to assume, but PowerPoint is pretty, I don't like Prezis. With my ADHD, it's just like, whoa, where'd that go? I'm not a fan. PowerPoints are relatively easy to use. They're very clean. They're, especially with the predetermined designs where it's like, oh, it has, the different colors and they're aesthetically pleasing. Don't read the slides to your audience, narrate your slides, don't get graphic crazy. So don't, if y'all remember, I don't know, you might be too young to, and I don't mean that in a condescending way, but there are transitions that you can do to where they like crawl up. And I remember when I was in middle school, that was like the big thing. And you put transitions everywhere. No one wants to sit there and wait for your slide to be like typed out or for the transition to pull through. That can waste time and be really distracting. And use a remote to advance slides. That way you're not having to walk back to the computer or laptop or whatever, go to the next slide, then walk back to the middle. That can be really distracting. The con is the time it takes to prepare slides and technology fails. Just know that for anything that requires technology, a con is always that technology fails. Okay, so those are the mediums for visual aids, and we will continue this in the next video.